They will not leave disappointed. This guy is unique, special, and we are privileged to be here today.
From an ownership perspective, the Chicago Bulls had a good enough season. 39-43 was good enough for the ninth seed in the Eastern Conference, and thus a play-in appearance. That resulted in extensions for both Billy Donovan and Arturas Karnisovas in the offseason. Zach LaVine was finally dealt to Sacramento in a 3-team trade, and the Bulls seemed to embrace playing Josh Giddey and Kobe White together en route to a play-in appearance. But below the results, the Bulls are pretty bad, and the fan base, at least on social media, has revolted. After 3 seasons with 39, 39, and 40 wins, the Bulls are stuck right in the middle. Too good to completely tank, too bad to truly compete. This team has been stuck in the mud since the magical first half of the 2023-24 season, and it feels like a year where the Bulls can truly let go of the rope. And maybe that is a good thing for the franchise's long-term outlook. The addition of Josh Giddey to the offense resulted in Chicago pushing the pace, finishing second in the league in pace, and launching a ton of threes, fifth in the league in three-point attempt rate. They also dominated the defensive glass, finishing second in defensive rebounding rate, but overall 20th in the league in offensive efficiency, 18th in defense efficiency, falls more in line with Chicago's overall profile. Chicago's best young player is Matthias Buzelis. Consider me excited for how much better Buzelis can be in his second year as a pro. Entering the league from the G League last year, Buzelis was considered much of a non-shooter. 1 year later, and he combined 36% shooting from the outside on 200 attempts to an interesting slashing profile, shooting 64% on shots at the rim. I'm a fan of his overall shooting and slashing profile, and I think getting him more on-ball looks should be a goal this upcoming season. With Josh Giddey running the offense and Kobe White being one of the best players in transition, there's room for Buzelis to grow as an overall threat both as a cutter, in transition, and work on his slashing and shooting profile this upcoming season. While I don't view him as a potential star, I'm curious to see what Chicago can do and how his development can shape the future of the Bulls in the long term. One of the main reasons why I don't view the Chicago Bulls as a team destined to let go of the rope and fall into the back end of the Eastern Conference is because of their role players on the roster, the good enough guys I call them. Guys like Kevin Huerter, Zach Collins, Ayo Dosunmu, Isaac Okoro. On the surface, none of these guys are actually really good players. You're probably looking at 8th, 9th men on teams with playoff second-round aspirations. However, those 4 guys combined give Chicago interesting profiles to throw on the floor. Considering Josh Giddey and Kobe White are 2 of the better players in both transition and pushing the pace, Kevin Huerter's three-point shooting is valuable. Isaac Okoro's defense and three-point shooting, although Okoro doesn't shoot with volume at the level of a Kevin Huerter, gives you 2 playable wings on the side. You have a guy in Zach Collins who, while doesn't profile as a starting backup, is more than efficient as a backup big who can also pass and rebound to allow the team to have some different options alongside him in the front court. Ayo Dosunmu's been a steady pro since his arrival from the University of Illinois and continues to do so. When you add those 4 guys to guys like Trey Jones, the Bulls have a talented group of role players that allow their top 3, Josh Giddey, Nikola Vucevic, and Kobe White, to thrive. Therefore, I think the Bulls ultimately are going to be a team that we look at and figure them into the play-in mix. I see the Bulls as the 9th best team in the Eastern Conference, largely where they've been the last few years, but now as they continue to add draft picks and they continue to move forward with this roster, there's a little bit more upside here thanks to the talent of Matthias Buzelis. But a Kobe White extension looms, and with Nikola Vucevic getting older, this team continues to fall into the same trap of kind of staying within the same place in the Eastern Conference. Extending Kobe White allows them to remain in a position to stay in the play-in, but maybe trading Kobe White pushes them out of the play-in for this year, maybe even next year, but could give them the assets that the Bulls need long-term to truly contend and battle in the Eastern Conference. Time will tell if the Bulls make the right decision. The 2024-25 Toronto Raptors were supposed to provide direction. After trading OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam, Toronto was left with several young players on the roster, earmarking a new era built around Scottie Barnes. Then everyone got hurt. Emmanuel Quigley played just 33 games, while R.J. Barrett, Jakob Poeltl, and Grady Dick all played under 60 games. Not as bad as Quigley, but a sizable chunk. The Raptors were bad, but not bad enough to get a high pick, and now entering the 2025-26 season, we're looking at the Raptors with a question mark. I think you can see the glimpses of what Toronto can be, at least on the defensive end. The Raptors finished 11th in defensive efficiency and 14th in opponent effective field goal percentage. A roster designed to have size and flexibility has glimpses of success on the defensive end. The issue is the offense, where the Raptors finished 25th in offensive efficiency and 29th in three-point attempt rate. All roads to Toronto being a good team this year start with Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley. I think that's the most important thing to say here. With Barnes, the question is more around, is there another leap there for him? In 2023-24, Barnes made the All-Star game, and we felt like we were in the midst of him ascending into a top 30 player. But the outside shooting fell off a cliff last year, and without someone to really lean on offensively, I think Barnes was kind of lost. He might be best served as a third guy on a team with playoff aspirations and being good, but when you look at the players in his draft class, a Cade Cunningham ascending, an Evan Mobley ascending, Franz Wagner being considered one of the 25 best players in the league, I think this is a very important year for Scotty Barnes to put everything together and give us an idea what he can be. Can he be a top 30 player who can be one of the two best players on a championship team? Or is he more of a top 45, 50 guy, 55 guy who's more of a Swiss Army knife and can do a bit of everything? And as far as Quigley is concerned, it's all about health. Last year, he missed a ton of games. I think that kind of hurt the fact that he was on the verge of taking a step forward. I do wonder what his long-term future is, if he is a point guard or if he's just a big guard that you kind of want to have get the ball sometimes and create and generate shots. Lethal outside shooter, should take more attempts. One of those guys that can take 7, 8, 9 threes a game. But overall, I kind of feel like his offensive value is kind of in question due to his inability to really run the offense at a level you really want. Now, another reason why I think the Raptors are kind of in this spot where they can make the play-in, make the playoffs, kind of intrigue people if they can take a step forward is this is a proof of concept year. We talked about they need last year with the young players, it was more of a year figuring out what you are. But the Raptors find themselves in a position where they invested a lot of money in all of these guys. Scotty Barnes got the big 5-year deal. Quigley got the big 5-year deal. RJ Barrett was traded to Toronto after signing a huge contract extension with the Knicks. Brandon Ingram. You traded for Brandon Ingram, then you paid him 3 years, $120 million this offseason. Jakob Hurtel, someone you traded for a couple seasons ago, gave up a top 10 pick, I believe. You signed him to a 4-year, $104 million extension. So to me, this season, more than anything, is just proof of concept of what the Raptors actually are right now. And after this season, I feel like we can have a better understanding of what their overall plans are. Because the Raptors have added these talents over the years, extended them, got contracts out for them, and then they drafted a Jacoby Walter last year. They drafted a Colin Murray Boyles this year. They have some guys, Grady Dick 2 seasons ago. I think Toronto's biggest thing is adding the salary, making sure that they have some players they can trade, and then they'll eventually trade these guys. We already heard talk about Toronto potentially trading RJ Barrett. We heard talk about them as a Lauri Markkanen team, or a team that will be buyers if they're progressing well during the regular season. So I think having these big contracts is a bit of a concern because it does gridlock you momentarily, but I think Toronto's doing it with the understanding of we need to figure out which one of these guys are our long-term pieces, and then we'll trade the rest. All in all, I have the Toronto Raptors as the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. I do think a part of that is because I kind of like the team, right? I like Quigley. Quigley's always been a Quigley fan. I think he can take a step forward. I think he's an interesting most improved player candidate just because he'll stay healthy, and I think there's grounds for him and his skill set to thrive in Toronto. They kind of need shooting. They don't really have very impact players. They don't really have guys who can kind of change the dimensions of the floor. And I think Quigley can do that. You look at the rest of that roster and they're solid. Ingram, when healthy, is a good scorer who can generate and create shots for himself. We talked about Scotty Barnes' flexibility. Walter and Murray Boyles would be effective rookies. Grady Dick, if he can shoot better, and shoot with more volume would be an interesting player just to be on that roster and benefit from the bent defenses of Ingram and Quigley. I like all these pieces together, and in an Eastern Conference where we don't know about Philly, we think Boston is taking a gap year, and Indiana is definitely taking a gap year. I think there's some wins on the table for the Raptors, and I think overall this is a season where we see them go from and also ran in the Eastern Conference to a playoff team. Discussing the Indiana Pacers is a wild ride. From January 1st on, the Pacers went 34-14 to close out the season. They knocked out the Milwaukee Bucks in round 1, shocked the top seed Cleveland Cavaliers in round 2, and bounced my New York Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals to advance to the team's first NBA Finals appearance since 2000. For about 4 minutes in Game 7, the Pacers looked poised to bring home their first NBA championship until Tyrese Haliburton unfortunately tore his Achilles, effectively ending their season and throwing the 2025-2026 season into flux. Now the Pacers are starting at square 2. Indiana's built a roster with several talented pieces, but everything is back on the table now that Haliburton is out for the year and Miles Turner opted to leave Indiana for Milwaukee. What happens to Pascal Siakam? Is this the year where Indiana's talent takes a step forward? How do the Pacers approach a gap year? The Pacers have several questions heading into the 2025-26 campaign, but several options on the roster to make it work. With Tyrese Haliburton out for the year, the biggest question for the Indiana Pacers, who's going to be the biggest benefactor in his absence? I think the question brings the answer of Andrew Nembhard, but it's complicated. Nembhard and Haliburton are vastly different players. Nembhard's a special defender who games takes a step forward, maybe 2 steps forward in the postseason, but has largely been a supporting player in the regular season, even though the numbers are really good with Nembhard on the floor and Haliburton off the floor. That should be stated. Haliburton is just an elite shooter, elite floor general who transforms Indiana's offense with his ability to push the offense, generate shots at a higher rate than most teams in the league, and backbreaking nuclear shooting from the outside. I think Nembhard gets a good chance at cracking the offense and being the leader at the point guard position. I'm bullish on him taking another step forward, right? I think when you look at the Pacers roster, there are several options that intrigue me with Nembhard playing more point guard. Obviously, they have some guys behind him, TJ McConnell. They just brought in Monte Morris. So you have like backup options. But I think Nembhard at the point guard position, allowing him to create and become more of an offensive threat, only helps the Pacers in the long run. So I'm kind of excited to see him in this role. While I don't see most improved player of the year, Andrew Nembhard, I think we're going to see him take a step forward, and he's going to be a catalyst in keeping the Pacers in the kind of playoff picture moving forward. Outside of Nembhard, the 2 players that I'm most interested to see for the Indiana Pacers are Jarris Walker and Benedict Mathurin. Mathurin's kind of a weird one. He was a 7th overall pick 3 years ago, and he spent the last 3 seasons shifting between start and reserve, largely because of the rise of Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith. Nesmith, one of the more underrated wing players in the league, right? Now, if Nembhard assumes that lead guard role, Nesmith starts, that second wing position is open. I think that's interesting for Mathurin to get. I think the issue for him is that he's just not great defensively, right? Which led to some tough decisions as Rick Carlisle and the Pacers went deeper into the playoffs. They didn't want to get hunted. You can play Nembhard and Nesmith together. Both of them are good defenders. Both of them are good shot makers, especially in the postseason. It left Benedict Mathurin on the outside looking in for minutes. This year now, as the Pacers kind of go through a bit of a trial balloon and figure out what they're doing and what players are going to ascend in the post-Haliburton period, I think Mathurin's going to be a guy that's going to take a step forward. Again, if his defense takes a step forward, not only will he be an interesting player for the Pacers this season, but as he becomes extension eligible and as we discuss more dollars, I think he's going to be an interesting player on the market as well. And Jarris Walker, this is free Jarris Walker. I've been a fan since he came out of Houston. This is more a hope than anything for the third-year man out of Houston. He played some small forward last year, quietly shot 40% from 3 on low volume. As they shuffle their roster around, right? Like the center position for the Pacers, you currently have 3 guys. I imagine they get down to 2 at some point who are going to play considerable minutes. You have Pascal Siakam, who looks to be the offensive center point, Obi Toppin behind him. As they reshuffle this roster around guards and forwards, I would love to see Walker get an uptick in minutes. I think he can play well on both sides of the ball, and he's still pretty young. I think he's 21 years old. He would be another good player to add into the mix for the Pacers as they go through their period without Haliburton. And once Haliburton comes back, I think he'd be an ideal option to play in some stronger lineup for, even if he plays some four and plays some small ball four and creates some shots from the outside. I think he's an ideal option. I would consider Jarris Walker to be one of the more interesting players in the league this upcoming season for can he break out. So Jarris Walker, Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nembhard from the prior scene, three guys on the Indiana Pacers that I think are really interesting in this gap year without Haliburton. Of the two teams in the Eastern Conference that are taking a gap year due to injuries and the Philadelphia 76ers, right? So you consider the Celtics, the Pacers, the Sixers. I think the Pacers are the best of the bunch simply because I think they have the best coach in Rick Carlisle. I think they have the hungrier players for this opportunity. Guys like Walker, guys like Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nembhard in a point guard role. You even got guys like Johnny Furpey, who saw a little bit of time last year, more known for his athleticism, very good athlete. You got a guy like Jay Huff, who was kind of like the third center, fourth, fifth big in Memphis, now getting some hype as a potential starter. I listed him as a starter. I still don't know if he's going to get that role. It may be Isaiah Jackson, a guy who tore his Achilles last year, but was really good in low-level minutes last year. The Pacers have a bunch of guys that I think are ready to take a step forward in whatever role they get. And you have a head coach who kind of knows how to balance that out. So I have the Pacers seventh in the conference. Just missing the top six seeding only because it's Pascal Siakam as the lead dog. And I think that kind of captures ceiling, even though I think Siakam's one of the 25 best players in the league. They just don't have that star guy to kind of fill in that gap. And I also think what's being underrated is that this is probably going to be an entire change around what Indiana does, at least for the interim, right? They don't have that guy in Haliburton who can generate shots for everyone at the level Haliburton did, combined with the three-point shooting. For all the talk about the Nembhard breakout season, he was pretty bad as a three-point shooter this past season. But overall, I got the Pacers as the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. I think they're going to make do with a good gap year, find one or two talents that makes a ton of sense, and then they'll be right back at the top of the Eastern Conference, unfortunately.